It gives me great pleasure now to introduce Mari Martiskainen. Mari is Professor of Energy and Society and the Director of the Energy Demand Research Centre. The research area relates to how we can transition our energy, housing and transport systems to help create a just and fair net zero society. And she's here today to introduce EDRC and will join us later in the question session. Mari.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I have the next slide, please? So welcome everyone. So the Energy Demand Research Centre is a £50 million investment from UKERC. So we are funded by EPSRC and ESRC, and we started in July 2023, and we have a 5-year program that is focusing on 5 main different research themes, which are there listed in the middle of the slide. But I wanted to highlight our team. So we have over 80 researchers now across 14 different universities in the UK. And we also have our flexible fund, which is now open. So we will really welcome others also to join the centre. And our research themes focus on place, flexibility, governance, futures, and equity. And I'm really delighted to be here in the meeting today because we are also having discussions from the previous centre, CREDS, which Sarah will introduce later on. So, and I'll hand over to Joanne now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mari. I'll just mention that Joanne is, Dr. Joanne Wade, OBE, is the Chief Strategic Advisor for the Association of Decentralised Energy. She's a trustee of the Energy Institute and on the advisory boards of both EDRC and UKERC, in which she's here today because of that. And her work is currently focused on buildings, energy efficiency policy and practice. And she's going to introduce UKERC and will also join us in the question session later.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. So as chair of the UK Energy Research Centre's Advisory Board, I'm really delighted to be here this morning and to introduce the centre to those of you who aren't familiar with our work. UKERC's a consortium of leading UK universities and was established in 2004. It's funded by UK Research and Innovation, and it's now in its 5th phase, which is going to run from 2024 to 2029. And in that phase, our research is focusing on 4 key challenges: delivery, flexibility, geopolitics, and affordability and justice. And UKERC's mission is to inform government, industry, and the public sector, and to help develop a resilient, affordable energy system for everybody. As well as having those 4 themes, we also help to enable the wider research community to maximise its impact through local, national and international engagement and conferences, roundtables, workshops and surprise, webinars. And this is the first in a series of webinars that will happen during UKERC's 5th phase and will cover all aspects of the energy transition. And we do hope that many of them, like this one, will be hosted jointly with our partners. And on that note, do look out for another joint UKERC IEA webinar that's coming up early in May on energy technology perspectives. And we're delighted for this webinar on energy efficiency to also partner with EDRC. And I think it's just one illustration of the close links between the 2 centres. A number of academics are involved in both UKERC and EDRC, including Karen Turner, who you're going to hear from later on this morning. UKERC's research on energy efficiency sits within the affordability and justice theme, and there are a number of projects ongoing on retrofit. And if you want to find out any more about those or anything else about UKERC, please do visit our website, and do also sign up for our newsletter to stay informed about future events like this, about opportunities we're offering, and about all the outputs from the centre. And that's enough from me, and I do hope you enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joanne. And now to the main event. I'm going to introduce Lucas Boulet, who is an energy efficiency analyst at the International Energy Agency based in Paris. He's the lead author of the Energy Efficiency 2024 report, which we're going to hear about, and is the IEA's primary analysis on global trends in energy efficiency markets and policy. Before he was with the IEA, he worked as a senior policy advisor on energy efficiency for the Netherlands government. Today he's going to talk about his report and work that's been done since. And his talk is called From Awareness to Ambition to Action. Over to you, Lucas.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, colleagues, for the nice invitation. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to tune in, and thank you to EDRC and UKERC for the kind invitation. My name is Lucas Boulet, and I'm an energy efficiency analyst here at the International Energy Agency in Paris. Specifically, I work in our Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions. The coming 15 to 20 minutes, I will talk to you a bit about our flagship report on energy efficiency, Energy Efficiency 2024, but I will also share some analysis specific to the United Kingdom with you, given today's focus of the webinar. I very much look forward to the discussion after my presentation as well. So I welcome you all to not only ask questions, but also provide suggestions and feedback for us, as we're currently already starting preparations for next year's report. To just give you an idea, both UKERC and EDRC colleagues have contributed massively throughout the report cycle, which has helped us a lot to improve the analysis. So we very much welcome that again this year. Given that we have a lot of people connected online with expertise on energy efficiency, we would love to hear from you. And you can also send suggestions directly to my email, which you can see at the bottom of the slide here. I would like to start with recalling an important milestone for energy efficiency in recent years. At the end of 2023, countries around the world came together at COP28 in Dubai and agreed to aim to double the global average annual rate of energy intensity improvements by 2030. This marked quite an historic milestone for energy efficiency in the global policy arena and was a sign of countries moving from awareness of energy efficiency, which had grown in response to the global energy crisis, to setting concrete ambition. In our report, Energy Efficiency 2024, we tried to estimate to what extent that ambition has turned into action yet. Let's first look at energy demand. Oh, excuse me. Not that fast. Let's first look at energy demand. After several external shocks to the energy system, you can see, for example, from 2019 to 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic had a big impact on transport energy demand in particular. And then the global energy crisis in 2022 showed significant effects to residential energy demand, but also industrial energy demand. In 2023, we estimate that energy demand grew at a rate of around 2%. That's similar to 2023. And again, we expect especially industrial energy demand to recover as pressures from the energy crisis ease. As many of you know, energy demand is driven by different forces. On the one hand, you have structural and activity effects potentially pushing up energy demand, such as more people getting access to energy, or more people, especially in advanced economies, using more energy in having more appliances or living in bigger homes, driving bigger cars. And on the other hand, you have efficiency trying to temper some of this demand growth. And the balance between these forces determines the overall demand growth and direction towards the future. And it's an important factor in energy efficiency progress globally. A second important factor affecting global progress on energy efficiency is how much money is flowing to efficiency, the level of investment. This includes businesses buying more efficient motors, governments spending on new subsidies, for example, on energy retrofits. But most investments in energy efficiency come directly from people at home, such as through insulating their house, buying an efficient heat pump, or switching to more efficient devices. And what we can see is that after significant growth between 2019 and 2022, energy efficiency investment has remained relatively flat since 2022. And 2024, we estimate a relatively weak growth of around 4% globally in efficiency-related investments. One notable development in 2024 is that some emerging markets in Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America are expected to see some of the fastest growth in efficiency-related investment in 2024. However, that's unlikely to shift the global total significantly, as these markets represent at the moment less than around 5% of total global investment in efficiency. As with most clean energy investments, currently efficiency investment is still heavily centralized in North America, Europe, and China. So now that we've seen some of the factors that potentially drive efficiency progress, it's time to look at how these forces have come together to determine overall energy efficiency progress in 2024. As some of you might know, here at the IEA, we measure energy efficiency progress with a range of indicators, but our main indicator is the change in primary energy intensity, which is comprised on the one hand, total energy supply, and on the other hand, GDP. And that means that if we use less energy to produce the same amount of outputs, the world as a whole is becoming more efficient. And in 2024, we estimate a slow global progress for energy efficiency of around 1%. That's similar to 2023. but significantly lower than the required level in the COP28 target to double global energy efficiency progress by 2030 that I mentioned in the beginning. As a result, we conclude that the world is currently not on track yet to achieve its ambition with regards to energy efficiency. However, in the past decade, many countries have managed to reach higher energy efficiency improvements, with 9 out of 10 countries, for example, achieving a rate of 4% at least once. So it is possible, but policy implementation needs to ramp up if we want to reach those levels again and sustain. When we look at longer-term trends, such as the average annual progress in the previous decade, from 2010 to 2019, we see something interesting happening for the United Kingdom. We see that the United Kingdom was the only G20 country in that decade to reach an average annual improvement rate in primary energy intensity of 4%. We can see China also saw strong progress, over 3.5%, and the world as a whole averaged an improvement of around 2% per year that decade. That brought us to the question, what happened in the UK that it posted such strong progress? So we decided to dedicate a portion of the report on a UK deep dive and do some extra analysis trying to find out why the United Kingdom posted this progress on energy intensity in the previous decade. And I'll talk a little bit about that now. First of all, when looking at the primary energy intensity improvement in the United Kingdom year by year, so not an average over a longer period of time, but just year by year, we can see a lot of variation indicated here by the blue bars on the chart. Primary energy intensity is affected by a range of factors, which is why it's often useful to look at longer term averages, because year to year there can be a lot of factors that change the annual total. And again, let's first start with final energy demand, one component affecting the total energy supply of the United Kingdom and indirectly its primary energy intensity. And what we can see is that in the previous decade, from again 2010 to 2019, we see energy demand across a range of end-use sectors in the United Kingdom falling, while some activity levels rose. What does that exactly mean, energy demand falling while activity levels rose? Well, for example, the population and the number of dwellings in the United Kingdom increased by 6 to 8% respectively, while residential energy demand dropped by over 20%, as indicated here. For industry, the story is a bit more mixed. We can see that energy demand in industry fell by around 16%, and part of it is driven by some structural shifts within industry, with, for example, a big decrease in steel production in the United Kingdom by over 20%, while cement production rose by 15%. So there are different forces at play in industry. And then lastly, in the transport sector, we see that it's one of the few sectors where final energy demand rose slightly over the analyzed period, by around 3%, but at the same time there was a 16% increase in the amount of vehicle kilometers traveled. So activity in transport increased more than that energy demand increased. And these sort of trends indicate the trends of using less energy to reach similar or higher levels of activity can indicate progress on energy efficiency in the United Kingdom. However, as said, primary energy intensity is driven by total energy supply, not final energy demand. So when looking at this primary energy supply in the UK, we can see another important driver of the change in energy intensity, namely coal use, or the use of fossil fuels, but specifically coal use, which was phased down rapidly in the previous decade. We can see that coal use dropped by around 80% from 2010 to 2019. Which has brought large system-level energy savings as thermal heat losses were reduced. And we can see that there was also significant growth in renewables, which grew by over 190% to around 530 petajoules in 2019. So this switching between fuels, bringing efficiency gains on the supply side of things, is also an important factor to take into account, explaining what happened in the United Kingdom in the previous decades. In terms of primary energy intensity change. So what we've seen, well, we've seen that in the period analyzed, 2010 to 2019, primary energy in the United Kingdom fell by around 17%, while GDP rose by around 19%. So that explains that change in energy intensity of around 4% per year, and that creates that strong progress. But if we then split these different effects up in terms of their impact on the reduction in total energy supply between those years, we can see that the switch away from coal, together with other fuel switches, was responsible for around 60% of the total decline, followed by around 30% explained by energy in buildings and 10% by industry. So this can give you sort of an indication of the magnitude of different forces at play in terms of primary energy intensity change. We then thought it would be interesting to look at specifically the building sector to see what happened there in terms of efficiency and other factors, where we can see this significant drop in energy demand. And unsurprisingly, in the United Kingdom, the majority of energy used in buildings is used for space heating, heating up homes and other buildings. We can see that this is also where the majority of the decrease in energy demand in buildings can be observed, specifically in gas use for residential heating. Gas consumption was down by around 30% in 2019 compared to 2010. However, one important factor to note is that 2019 was also a warmer year than 2010, so there was less need for gas for heating too in 2019 compared to 2010. However, when we look at all the different effects, that does not explain the full effect, meaning efficiency also played an important role. One way to estimate sort of the effects of energy efficiency and isolate it is by doing decomposition analysis, where the change in final energy demand between 2 given years is split in activity effects, structural effects, and efficiency effects. And based on that analysis, we estimate that the final energy demand in the United Kingdom would have been around 14% higher in 2019 had it not been for energy efficiency improvements in buildings, transport, and industry. So now let's look at the UK in a bit more recent years, since 2019. We know that the United Kingdom relies on natural gas for residential heating more than almost any other country in the world. One of those other countries is my home country of the Netherlands, which you can see all the way at the top there. But the UK follows closely with nearly 75% of residential heating demand covered by natural gas. And that, of course, also had its effect on energy bills during the energy crisis, global energy crisis, especially in 2022, when gas prices skyrocketed. And we see that energy bills in the United Kingdom, just like in many other countries, particularly in Europe, rose significantly during the energy crisis. And they have come down slightly in 2023 and 2024, but they remain significantly elevated above those pre-crisis levels, just like in many other countries, which is causing significant issues for people living in energy poverty, for example. And what we argue in the report is that energy efficiency is an effective way to structurally lower those elevated energy bills and alleviate pressure from price shocks, including future price shocks. Household energy bills are up to 75% lower in well-insulated, efficient buildings compared to less efficient ones, which can represent quite a large share of household income, particularly for the most vulnerable households with slightly lower income at their disposal. So to conclude, the UK has seen strong energy intensity progress over the last decade, driven by a range of factors, such as fuel switching on the supply side, weather factors, but also, and crucially, energy efficiency. For example, space heating demand per household is down 20% in 2022 compared to 2010, and 52% of homes is classified as having an energy label C, compared to only 12% of buildings in 2010. And we believe that the UK's experiences with policies on energy efficiency, such as listed here for residential energy efficiency policies, example is the Energy Company Obligation, Warm Homes Plan, and other residential energy efficiency progress. These can provide important lessons for other countries around the world. On top of that, the detailed public data that is available in the UK on these different policies and their effects, and the widespread research by institutions such as UKERC and EDRC really help policymakers to identify what went well with policy and what might not have gone well. And we here at the IEA believe that is crucial to improve policy for energy efficiency, especially in the years to come. So it's not only relevant for UK policymakers, but also policymakers in other countries to observe what went well with policy, what might not have gone well, and what are the magnitudes of the different effects So we very much welcome you to continue the research in that area. And I think it's very beneficial for many policymakers. And our member countries always come to the IEA to ask what the effects of certain policies are. So that information definitely helps. To then quickly zoom back out again to a more global perspective, which is something that we mostly analyze here at the IEA. We can see that policy action on energy efficiency is ramping up across the world, not only in Europe, and partly in the United Kingdom. What we can see, for example, is that just in the last 10 years, 33 countries around the world have introduced new minimum energy performance standards for a range of different technologies. We can see the difference here on the slide between 2014 and 2024 for technologies such as air conditioning, lighting, industrial motors, but also cooking technologies. So we see that countries are ramping up their policies. In 2024 alone, 13 countries updated these minimum energy performance standards. So there is a lot of policy action going on energy efficiency. But what we also see at the same time is that there is still significant scope to increase the stringency of these energy efficiency policies. The slide here shows in the blue bars the range between different countries in terms of their stringency. Shown here is lighting and air conditioning minimum energy performance standards. In the report, you'll find other technologies such as industrial motors and vehicles as well. And what we can see is that there's a large variation between countries. And we here at the IEA believe that there is potential for countries to align those standards more and increase the stringency of different policies and update them regularly. Besides, of course, the focus on implementation and enforcement of these policies to make sure that what's intended in theory also works in practice. You can read more on different regions, different sectors, and different topics of the report online. You can scan this QR code or just go to the IEA website, look for energy efficiency, and you'll find it. It's freely available on the website. And in parallel to the report, also I think a very innovative and cool tool is our new energy efficiency progress tracker. We launched it in parallel with Mark's report in November. And on the website, you can now freely access data on a range of different indicators, from primary energy intensity to final energy intensity, electrification progress, energy demand per sector. And you can do that for a range of different countries, different regions, and it's all freely available on the website. So I highly recommend you to check that out as well. We'll regularly update the progress tracker throughout the different years. So that should be the most recent data that we have available and we'd like to share with you. Finally, before I close, I'd like to mention our next big event coming up on energy efficiency, which is our annual global conference on energy efficiency. This year, it will be co-hosted by the European Commission and will take place on the 12th and 13th of June in Brussels. This is sort of the IEA's most high-level event on energy efficiency, where ministers, CEOs, other leading voices on energy efficiency, but also senior policy advisors come together and discuss the state of play of energy efficiency at the moment, but also the direction of travel for the future and any plans and best practices that countries can share there. So we very much invite you to follow that event as well. Many of the side events will be live streamed, so mark those dates in your agenda. That's all from my side. Again, thank you for taking the time to tune in, and thank you for the invitation to EDRC in UKERC. I look forward to discussing with you for the rest of the webinar and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to the chair.
Thanks very much, Lucas. That was really interesting. Just to mention that we seem to have a little glitch with the system today, and that means that you've all been called Dan. If you want to change your names, you can click on the three little dots on the top right-hand side of your video screen, but it doesn't really matter as long as you can see here. I'm hoping that will all be okay. And just a reminder to please put your questions into the chat. That would be brilliant. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nick Eyre. Nick is a professor of energy and climate policy. Until recently, he was the director of the Centre for Research into Energy Demand Solutions, which is the predecessor of EDRC. He acts as the scientific advisor on climate change to Oxford City Council and is interested in the role of public policy in reducing energy demand and carbon emissions. and the transition to zero carbon energy systems. He will spend 5 minutes now responding to what he's heard. Nick, if you could turn on your camera and start talking, that would be brilliant.
Thank you, Sarah. I think my camera is now on.
It is.
And thanks to Lucas for a really interesting presentation. And actually thanks to the wider group of colleagues in the IEA for doing this international work, because it really is helpful and illuminating. And I was one of the people involved in looking at the UK deep dive, so I've had the opportunity to see this well in advance. Many of you, like me, will be surprised to see the UK top of a list like this. And the surprise is that many people on this call will know that energy efficiency ambition was reduced quite significantly during the period 2010 to 2019. So the part of the deep dive, as Lucas said, was really to think about what is going on here. And just to pull out 2 points that Lucas has already made, but really to try and put numbers on them. We think that the specific choice of years from going from 2010 to 2019 was significant, in that 2010 was a very cold year and 2019 was a very warm year. And obviously space heating is an important part of UK energy use. My calculations indicate that's about 0.7% per year of the 4% that Lucas mentioned. Similarly, the choice of a primary energy metric is important here. Many of us think about energy efficiency as being related to final energy, but of course what goes on upstream also does matter. And about 0.6% of the effect seems to be the shift away from coal and latterly gas towards renewables, where the primary energy input is clearly much smaller. So there are some sort of methodological issues that help push the UK up the list, but as Lucas said, very clear, energy activity was rising in this decade, final energy use was falling. So there's some very real effects driven by real policies. If we look at what those are, the UK was, of course, a member of the EU throughout this decade. There are important areas of European policy, the emissions trading scheme, particularly product policy in traded goods, appliances, vehicles, etc. And you can see that all the EU countries are relatively high up the list for that reason, some pretty effective policies there. But also some at UK level, major insulation and advice programs up to 2013. Committee on Climate Change have repeatedly flagged that they've slowed since then. So I would be cautious about the conclusion that it's current insulation policies that are effective. I think it's the real lessons of the past policies were very effective. And also there is quite a lag to the impacts of energy efficiency policies. A good example would be the phase out of non-condensing boilers, which began in 2005, but due to boiler lifetime means that most of the changes actually occurred in the decade that the IEA have examined. So a policy that was first thought of in 2003 has had policies right through to 2019. And in many ways, I think that's the key takeaway from this analysis, that energy efficiency improvement is about long-term socio-technical change rather than a quick fix. And the effects of energy efficiency policy take time to come through, but if and when you get it right, it can have lasting impacts. So going forward, can we deliver the 4% target? Yes, I think we can. Over 25 years, we're going to have to deliver a revolution in heating and transport through electrification of them, and these will lead to big energy efficiency improvements. alone, they will be responsible for 2 to 3% improvement in energy efficiency per year in the long run out to 2050. So 40% as a total seems eminently achievable. Whether it's achievable by the 2030 date that the UNFCCC targeted, I personally doubt, because I just don't think we can change our policies fast enough to deliver increase at that speed. But I would be very confident that this sort of analysis shows that we can reach 4% in the long term going forward, not just in the UK, but globally. That's it from me, Sarah.
Great, thanks very much, Nick. If you could turn off your camera, and Karen, if you could turn yours on. Professor Karen Turner is the Equity Theme Lead at EDRC and the Director of the Centre for Energy Policy at the University of Strathclyde, as well as being involved in UKERC's next funding phase, as Joanne mentioned. She's also a member of the Scottish Government's Just Transitions Commission. Her main research interests lie in modelling the macroeconomic consequences of energy policy and industry developments, and considering how to build policy narratives to support decarbonisation. She will also spend 5 minutes responding to what she's heard. Thanks, Karen.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much, Lucas, for giving the presentation this morning, and of course for your team in producing the very valuable report. So I thought one of my first thoughts when I was reading through the report was, are the opportunities for increased efficiency slowing in more developed countries like the UK? I thought, well, maybe to some extent, but there's still plenty of routes, not least via increased electrification and improving building stocks, which, as the equity theme lead in EDRC, that's really important for people who are struggling with high energy bills, as Lucas has pointed out. And I think generally, I'm an economist, increasing efficiency is always a good thing for the economy as well as the climate. But, one key barrier, all the years that I've been working in energy efficiency, is around the upfront costs that are involved. And obviously, that's more of a concern for those least able to pay, which brings, one of the kind of headline policy challenges, one of the most difficult to tackle. I think, moreover, as highlighted in the report, that there are constraints beyond budgets, with skills shortages being a major challenge across the net zero space. We find that just across our research at the Centre for Energy Policy. And it's not just about the risks and delays, risks about delaying implementation, but also the overall cost of delivery will be pushed up for energy users and for economies, where labour shortages trigger wage cost pressures that, of course, will have wider impacts and lasting impacts throughout economies. But, of course, governments, that means they need to act on alleviating constraints as well as on energy efficiency, because action in energy efficiencies, as the IEA report shows and as Lucas has emphasised, is a crucial route to both lowering energy bills, meeting our climate ambitions, and also delivering the wider economy gains that can generate more income and revenue to pay for things, including more energy efficiency, so that we could, in principle, have something of a virtuous circle. But we need to breach the barriers in terms of the upfront costs and some of the constraints on our system. I think, as the report points out, a crucial thing here is making what we have to replace more energy efficient, and that that's been very important in terms of manufacturing standards and things, that whenever we get rid of our inefficient appliances, get them out of the system, we're taking on more efficient things in terms of whether we want to or not. We should always want to, but that's what you get when you go out and purchase a new appliance. So standards are really important. I think, kind of as the report has shown, in the UK, phasing down coal has been crucial, and energy demand has fallen while many activity levels have risen. And, the crucial thing is that space heating is the main element of residential energy consumption, certainly in the UK, and there both electricity and gas consumption have fallen. But I think gas use is really what we need to crack in the UK, and reducing it is both more problematic and more crucial for low-income consumers. But we have to make sure we do it in ways that don't cause them to underheat their homes, because that's the wrong type of energy demand reduction, or where they have to bear huge upfront costs in changing how they get their heat. And I think here, as energy bill remains high, energy efficiency is a key tool for affordability, but the real challenge is how it's delivered. More fundamental approaches like loft and cavity wall insulation are important, but they're not enough if households, particularly low income and more vulnerable ones, remain locked into gas heating, even if they've got more efficient boilers, which of course are coming with standards now. Our CEP team's work with UKERC also highlighted the challenge of the price of electricity being high relative to that of gas in the UK. That's a problem where electrified solutions are more efficient, but if the economic benefits of more energy efficient heating systems are being eroded through the high cost of electricity relative to gas. So that's a challenge, kind of balancing those off without putting all the burden on gas prices, where that's going to fall on more vulnerable consumers. Also, some of our more recent research on the equity theme of EDRC has shown that with a very supply-constrained construction sector being central in delivering basic energy efficiency improvements, such as loft and cavity wall insulation, there's a real risk that government spending on behalf of those less able to pay could displace private investment, including in a range of other net zero activities. So I think that brings me back to thinking about how the range of constraints that we've got here that are likely preventing progress in energy efficiency with the delivery of skills in local supply chains in particular being a really key challenge here. And that's one with an equity dimension as well. I mean, we need an increase in equity and job creation. Policies supporting training, upskilling, and gender inclusion in energy efficiency sectors are critical to ensuring fair access to new job opportunities. Thus, labour justice and green job creation and growth is another central focus of the work that we're doing in the EDRC equity theme. And I think it's another area, in addition to those that Lucas has highlighted, where the UK should be striving to provide useful lessons for other countries and to take leadership in that regard, as well as on the energy efficiency policies themselves. But we need to effectively and efficiently, because that word keeps on coming up, not just on energy, we need to crack the problem first of how we in the UK, if we're going to be a leader in delivering a just and equitable path forward, a core element has to be closing both efficiency and other equity gaps, including access, as we reduce our energy demand and as we develop deliverable solutions for doing so. So that's my bit. Thanks again, Lucas, for the presentation.